It is passion fruits.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Passion Fruits, a passion project for passionate people. I'm your nectarine nerd, Adam.
And I'm your hair of the dog, Daniel. Oh,
oh man. And today we have two fantastic guests here on the podcast.
We do, Adam. But what is a podcast, and what is our podcast?
Oh yeah, we should probably explain what the heck we're doing here.
I'm so excited.
A podcast is like the radio for the internet radio, if you will. And on this podcast, in this internet radio show, we talk and explore into many different subjects, nouns, verbs, adverbs, if you will, and discuss what takes someone from being a casual fan of something to being a more passionate or fanatic about that noun, verb, or adverb, or adjective even, if you will. So we really like to dive a little bit deep, talk to people, learn their story, and really discover what makes people tick.
Like soap operas, they're my stories, and we're going to get some other stories from people. So,
oh boy. Our guests have already left the recording studio.
I see they've dropped off the Zencaster call.
Yeah, this was fun, guys.
Just you and me, Adam.
Here we go. Anyways, let's introduce our guests, Daniel. I'll try this for the second time thus far. Let's see, because you're higher up on the list, Lauren, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, sure. I am the lovely lychee Lauren. Well, or lychee, because it didn't sound right when I said lychee. I am excited to talk about some bike packing and adventure riding and some backpacking and some just adventures.
Fantastic. Pleasure to have you on the podcast, Lauren. And then Liz, last but not least.
Hi, I did not have time to come up with a funny fruit, and Lauren took the only one that I know with an L besides lime. I'm definitely not a lime. So, hi, I'm
lemon?
Liz. I'm really excited
What about, lemon.
Oh, yeah, lemon.
Liz
or
Lemon.
lime.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
That's 30 wrong.
Typically
nice.
that I don't partake in often. Anyways, I'm excited to talk about backpacking because I've been slightly obsessed with it for the better part of a decade now.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, so this episode is going to be dedicated to Liz and Lauren and their love and passion for backpacking and bikepacking. Let's kind of dive right into it. I guess in our outline, it starts first with backpacking. So who would like to start first? What is backpacking?
Do you want me to read the Wikipedia?
Whatever you want to do, Liz. Give your own. Make it your own words.
Okay.
Really paraphrase for us.
Well, to me, backpacking it can be a lot of different things. A lot of people, consider it different things. I think when you boil it down, it's always putting stuff in a bag and going into the woods for a duration longer than a day hike. Usually you're packing something to sleep with, some food, and you at least intend to spend at least one night out there, sometimes multiple. There's people like the thru hikers that do the whole AT, and then there's other people that just do the weekend hike. So it can kind of be anything, but it's usually farther into the woods than you can get with just a day hike and some sandals.
Yeah, usually backpacking, you sometimes go out into the backcountry where you get away from civilization, and it can involve mountains, it can involve lakes, it can involve creeks, it can even involve the ocean.
I don't think so. I think that's called swimming.
I think that's a paddle trip.
You truly haven't backpacked then, Adam.
I guess I haven't, Daniel.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Liz.
Well, and I'm going to add on to that and say that
Yes,
it doesn't
please.
have to be just going out into the woods. You can do backpacking and do urban backpacking and exploration, where by definition you are traveling around a location with just a backpack. Um, but that's what you've got. So day to day, you're still going. You might be staying at hostels, you might be staying at different locations, different couches, but you still are carrying your wares on your back in your backpack, not necessarily the definition per se, but just going around and living off of what you have with you.
Excellent
Yeah.
point.
Good point.
We
Hey,
just got-
Lauren, that was okay.
It was just mediocre.
Medium point, okay?
I'll try to be sharper next time.
Can't get you feeling too high and mighty. Then you'll take over this podcast from me and Adam.
That's the oh wait, what?
No, damn it.
Liz, we can't be too obvious too soon.
I already
Right.
have one of the microphones.
Oh no, Daniel! Dang it! They tricked us.
They never-
I was supposed to give her the fake one, the dribble microphone.
Whoa.
And when you try and take a sip of water out of it, it dribbles on you. Oh boy.
I don't know where that was going.
Yeah, this is why we do this late at night, right? Well, yeah. So, and also we're talking about bike packing. So, Lauren, would you like to and Liz, would you like to talk about bike packing?
Well, sure. I think similarly to backpacking, bikepacking can also have multiple connotations. I would tend to, my paradigm of bikepacking has been maybe more adventure riding, but where you have all of your goods, all of your things with you that you just travel around and you go out and live, sleep where you're at and pack up and go to the next destination the next day. So I would say that has been my experience. One of the adventures that I've been on was RAGBRAI. I won't get too far into that, but I would almost consider that bike packing. It's not necessarily, and I'm sure true bike packing enthusiasts would very much disagree with that as bike packing. But we packed up. I rode from place to place and slept in a tent or hammock each night, and rinse and repeat until you got to the final destination. But alternatively, you could find an off the beaten trail. You could go find any of these old canal trails and just go place to place. Again, sleeping where you're at, carrying what you have, eating either off the land or the gas station that you come across.
Yeah, I think bikepacking kind of has just the general sense of adventure riding, like she's been saying. The big bike packing kind of rides that I have been, looking into are the big ones across the country and, the Continental Divide and things like that. They're much like, RAGBRAI, where, RAGBRAI goes across Iowa, like she was referring to. And by the way, nobody can give you any crap for a bike packing ride that involves so much pie. That's just wrong.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. You pack up, you ride to the next destination, you camp, and you're just surviving on your own. That's the beauty and the challenge of it.
I think it's one point is bike packing has kind of the definition of which is morphed from bicycle touring, and like this is in our Wikipedia page, but I think the broader listening audience, all out of the billions of listeners that we have,
Right.
they'll probably more identify with bicycle touring, because bike packing is interesting because I associate it a little bit more with off-road riding, whereas bike, like the delineation that in my mind, which it's a pretty low bar, but in my mind, like the bicycle touring is more like kind of on road type touring, whereas bike packing is more off road gravel. I have a bunch of friends that do bike packing, but like on single track mountain bike trails kind of thing. So, but I think they're all one and the same. And as both Liz and Lauren stated beforehand, it's all about this whole sense of adventure riding and riding not necessarily for for a competition or for like everyday recreation, but like to go somewhere.
See things.
Exactly. And kind of related to our gravel cycling episode with a good friend of the podcast, Jeff, talking about his experience with gravel cycling. And that's kind of bicycle touring was kind of the forefather of gravel bikes and gravel cycling and all these long gravel rides that have kind of morphed into bike packing and bicycle touring in the 21st century, the future. So yeah, well, thank you so much, Liz and Lauren and Liz, for the definitions and explanations of bike packing and backpacking. Shall we dive into story time and Coco Corner and kind of hear how both of you got into backpacking and bike packing?
Yeah.
And your hopes and dreams for
Sounds
both?
like a great idea.
Woo! Otherwise, it would be a very short episode.
It's a real short podcast.
Right, and we're done.
Nice chat. Good chatting. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, good talking to you guys. All right, bye.
So with that, let's start with backpacking, because I think all of us collectively, all four of us talking right now, have a little more history with backpacking than bikepacking. So we'll start with Lauren. What first got you into backpacking, and kind of tell us a little bit about, was it childhood events that you like, kind of childhood activities that you grew up with it, or did you find it later on in life? To give us the situation.
Yeah.
Scoop.
So we grew up, I am from Connecticut originally. We grew up camping. Our family vacations, there were 5 of us. We would all load up into the family van and road trip, essentially. We would go into Canada at the time. You didn't need to have passports. So I just remember we would go up quite often up to the maritime provinces, New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and go and camp there. And so I think that's where the adventure started. So doing tenting, and there was always an adventure. There was one time where we forgot our tent poles in Connecticut, and we didn't figure that out until we went to set up the tent. Oh, I don't know, 8:00 at night once we arrived there. Oh yeah.
So what happened with that, Lauren?
We learned about a store called Canada Tire. It basically had everything. Yeah, Canada Tire?
Yeah, I went into one when I was up in Toronto because I was like, oh, it's like a Just Tires. Like, nope, like Walmart.
It's like Walmart. That's exactly what it was.
It's a real misnomer.
Yeah,
it was Canada Tire. Who would have thunk it that we would have been able to find tents in Canada Tire? So we grew up doing that. We grew up tenting, always on campgrounds. I never ended up going officially backpacking until I was in college. I went out with my brother and his girlfriend at the time, and we did a backpacking trip by then I had moved down to North Carolina. And so we went out to the North Carolina mountains, out to Pisgah National Forest, and ended up going to Looking Glass and decided we were going to go backpacking out there. So I think I rented some equipment from the rec center, and he was able to bring the rest of it from his university rec center. And we went out backpacking for a 3-day adventure. And I just remember loving the adventure of it. It was cold. We got to the top and we camped somewhat at a campsite somewhat towards the top. And all night long, I could just hear the coyotes all around. And there was a sense of, it was on one hand terrifying. On the other hand, it was exhilarating knowing that we were up there just out in nature, and hiked back down, and that was it. And at that point I thought, this is pretty cool. I think there was a sense of empowerment that really got me excited about doing it. Okay, you know what? I could be out here. I don't have to be stuck in my 4 walls. I think there was a freedom that came with that. And just that sense of adventure. It spoke to the get out and go of my personality. Go make it happen. Go do. Go explore. And I think that was probably where I ended up deciding, I think I could be into this.
You've had some pretty awesome trips as of late, Lauren, but I would like for Liz to talk to kind of how she got into it. And then I have a follow-up question for both of you all.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Sure. Yeah, I
Go,
was
Liz,
listening
go.
to Lauren's story and felt like I don't have nearly as cool of an origin story. We didn't camp when I was a child. My dad didn't believe in tents. He thought that they were too much of a fuss with 4 kids. So we had a motorhome. That was my camping when I was a child. But before or when not including the camping, I would always play in the woods. We had about 200 acres of family land that we had built a house on, so I could wander in the woods for hours and never be off of my family's land. And that's kind of how I got hooked with just being in the backcountry and exploring, not knowing, what I would see next and that sort of thing. I never really camped until I got into college and met Steven, and he invited me to do a 24-hour mountain bike race called the Burn 24-Hour, which was in Wilkesboro, North Carolina. They're not having it anymore, unfortunately, but that was I had to like rent a tent from NC State kind of thing. I didn't even have a tent or a sleeping bag or a pad, and I tented for the first time in a field full of other mountain bikers. And we did that like 5 years in a row, and I was hooked on camping.
What do you mean that's not a cool story?
Yeah.
Well,
That's an
hold on,
awesome
I'm not done
story.
yet.
Okay, sorry.
Oh God, Liz, what did you do?
It gets so lame from here. I'm just kidding. No, that was. I thought about that after you were talking about how you used to camp all the time. I was like, I guess the first time I really started camping was the mountain bike racing, which I mean was so much fun. I wish that they still did 24-hour races here in the East, because it was just a blast to be sleep deprived and exhausted and a little drunk and racing my mountain bike. Anyways, I digress. When we were getting married, we registered at REI for all this backpacking gear because Steven thought it would be a great idea to give it a try. We got some backpacking gear and gave it a go for a couple trips, and he didn't really like it, but I completely fell in love with it. I loved the idea of getting so high up into the mountains that there weren't bugs chirping anymore, and being in an area that not a whole lot of people get to see. It was, like Lauren said, it was empowering to know that I can survive on my own, which is what I can carry. And I mean, part of that's probably because I'm 5 foot nothing, and I can actually carry enough for me to survive, which is kind of impressive to myself. And I haven't been able to stop since, really.
So, I mean, both of you all kind of spoke to that, I would say realization, but kind of the growing in the knowledge that you all can fend for yourselves, for lack of a better term. But I think one of the things that, and we can get to this later in the next section, if you will, but what was it like for the first time for you all sleeping outside? Like, what was like the visceral feelings?
I didn't sleep.
No.
Oh shoot! I still don't sleep.
I used to have to wear ear plugs just so I could drown out enough of the sound so I could sleep.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's interesting you say that, Liz, because everyone's like, it's so quiet in the woods. They go, no, it's not. No. Nighttime in the woods is really loud. There's always stuff walking around. There's always wind, but it's almost relaxing in a sense because you're not separated from this. You're not insulated from the rest, from nature, which I think is one of the coolest things possible. Unless you know there's a bear around, then that gets scary.
So
Right.
that might be another section story. I now have a very hard time actually backpacking and sleeping in the woods because I did have a bear incident.
Ooh.
Oh gosh.
Oh yeah. I don't know if that's now or later, but
go ahead and tell the story now.
Okay, so I decided to go backpacking. I was with 2 other women. We were all in our separate tents, and
you were with 2 other bears, and that's why you had a lot of trouble.
Just you would not think that they would misbehave.
Right. You forgot all the honey, and then it just turned into a terrible.
It was a mess. It was a mess. So we were out there, and we had done what we were supposed to be doing, had the bear hang. There were a few things that I had noticed that I didn't quite agree with from some of the other women, where it was, that's a pineapple scented wet wipe. That probably shouldn't be used to wipe down the
Oh, no.
dining area. But,
Oh, God.
right. So anyway, so that just sets the stage. But we hung our food, 50 yards away. At that point in time, the bear canisters were not a requirement like they are today. So we just hung it. We hung it on rope. We set it in a tree, let it be. And that was that. So went to bed. 1 o'clock or so in the morning, I hear real heavy footsteps outside my tent, and I'm listening for what it is. And then I hear breathing right outside my tent, and I go into, oh boy, oh that's not good. So when you have a bear situation, they're real smart. So at that point, all you do is just say, go away, bear, go away. So that's what I was saying. I was, go away, go away. I did have a whistle on my backpack, fortunately. So I was whistling and just trying to get it to go away. Meanwhile, the other women were like, it's just a deer. It's fine. I'm like, it was breathing outside my tent. It was not a deer. I heard the breath. It was not a deer.
Right. Did you know bear breath? I know bear breath. Okay. That was bear breath.
That was bear breath. So anyway, so try to go back to sleep, knowing that there was a bear right outside my tent really wasn't succeeding. So next thing I know, we're hearing in the direction of where our food bag was hung, we're hearing pots and pans, and then we hear a thud, and it's pots and pans along with the thud. And we're like, oh, that's not good. So we all get out of our tents, shine the flashlight over that direction, barely catch enough light, or there's barely enough light to be able to catch eyeballs. But it wasn't just one set of eyeballs. Come to find out, it was Mama Bear and her 3 cubs.
Oh, shit.
That Mama Bear sent her cubs up into the tree to go get the food. Smart. Because the cub was able to go up and swat it out. Mama Bear couldn't have done that, but the kids, gotta watch out for those baby bears.
She was delegating. She's a good delegator.
She was great. She knew how to instruct. So anyway, so they went and had their way with our food, ate all the sardines. They came back the next morning, all 4 of them. So, needless to say,
Lauren, are we talking to a ghost right now? What happened?
I got real big and I said, "Go away, bear," and they listened.
Wow.
I mean, in so few words, there were a lot of, it was close to the Appalachian Trail. And so they were just used to people, and they were used to getting food, for that exact reason. And so they're smart cookies. But anyway, so when you ask about sleeping in the woods, I didn't used to have the fear, but now I have the fear. Liz has seen me with the fear.
I have seen the fear.
What was that leaf crinkle? They're here.
Lauren, we're on my deck right now. Like, that was just a squirrel, probably.
Squirrels are just tiny bears.
But however, this is not to dissuade any listeners from going backpacking. That's just my own personal experience. And I still go backpacking, and I just put earplugs in and don't sleep. It's fine. Bottom line, if there's a sign that says there may be bears in the area, just pay attention to it, because there are bears in the area.
The more you know.
That's right. Bottom line, I'm alive. It's fine. Go backpacking. It's an adventure. Sleeping in the woods. It's great. It's so peaceful, but not.
So, like, both my parents are still are super into the outdoors, and I think, like yourself, Lauren, so my dad is a lovely human being, but he loves nature, he loves backpacking. He's also a cheapskate, so you know what the cheapest family vacations are?
Yes, I do. Car camping.
Now, granted, we did do some pretty awesome trips around the world to go backpacking, but regardless, it was I grew up. I think I got my first backpack when I was 5, And my first overnight backpack trip was a half a mile up the trail to the campsite and a half mile back. My backpack contained my, a couple shirts and my teddy bear and
Nice.
the marshmallows that we were going to use to make s'mores. So that's how I got my start. But I was also this nervous wreck of a little kid. So my parents were pretty chill and they go with the flow, and they're just, I think they've experienced enough shit in their life that not a whole lot faces them these days. But so when I was growing up, and we went backpacking out west a few times, and I really liked backpacking, but I was also a voracious reader. So I would always go and read all the books in like the ranger stations they had. And I happened upon a book called Bear Attacks. And we were out in Wyoming. And I was terrified. I was like, we're going to get eaten by a grizzly bear. I guarantee you. So I was basically freaking out. I said, Dad, we have to buy a shotgun. We have to buy bear spray. And my dad's like, no, we're not doing that at all. The compromise was my parents bought both my sister and I bear bells, which bear bells are little bells that you tie to your shoelaces. So every time you walk, it like jingles. Arguably, and apparently, I didn't realize this at the time, but they got lost over the course of the backpacking trip. Consequently, they were found again at the very bottom of my mother's backpack, wrapped in a bunch of socks. So I hear you. I hear you on the fear of bears. It is a running joke in my family from here. Like my sister for my birthday one year literally got me a pack of cards. I still have them here somewhere. That's bear prevention techniques. So that's me in the outdoors, y'all. So
Yes.
I'm a special.
Nice. I used to be scared to walk by windows in upstate New York because I thought that the bears would be able to break through the windows and get me. That was me growing up as a child. I've almost always had a dog with me. So if my dog reacts to something, then I start getting nervous. But for the most part, I mean, if she's sleeping and not raising the alarm, then I feel like I could probably settle as well.
So I would kind of like to hear, because what we kind of try and do on these episodes is try and get to kind of the point where you realized, and kind of, because everybody kind of has a story about kind of the subject that we're talking about how you realized you were like an obsessed fanatic about the subject. So I would like to hear from Liz and Lauren kind of what was the trip that made you think like, and I guess we kind of, expound on kind of what was the trip that made you think, I love backpacking, and we can start getting into bikepacking. But I love being out in the woods. I love carrying my own stuff. Like, what was that catalyst where you're like, okay, I want to keep doing this and plan a bigger trip and plan a longer trip and plan, to go with other people who are passionate about this kind of hobby and sport and lifestyle? Like, what was kind of that sticking point for you guys?
Okay, I was about to say I have one in mind. It's kind of a funny story because it does not shed me in a wonderful light.
Oh no.
I love self-deprecating stories. They're the best, right? Okay, so I think it was my fourth backpacking trip. It was the first time I went with my friends Kim and Blake, and we decided to conquer this wilderness out in the western part of the state called the Joyce Kilmer Wilderness. What's really neat about this wilderness is it has the last old growth forest of North Carolina. So there's a memorial forest that has the greatest concentration of the old growth trees, but the big trees are also kind of just dispersed within the wilderness as well. So it's really cool. You'll walk around passing normal oaks, and then all of a sudden there'll be this gigantic poplar that just soars to the sky, and that's just really neat. That was why we wanted to go there. So we made a plan to do a 2-night trip in April of 2015, I think, something like that. And we get there, we get to the trail, we'd find out it's supposed to rain that night. So we decided to change it from a 2-nighter to a 1-nighter. But we carry everything just in case. We hike up the trail that we had picked, which was called Naked Gap, I believe. I strongly encourage you to not Google that. That's not friendly.
Too late. Oh no.
So you hike up Naked Gap and you get to Naked Gap, and that it's just a saddle between two mountains, but it's got this magnificent view of the valley with Lake Santitla down there, and it was just the most beautiful view I have ever seen from a camping site. And that just it totally took my breath away. We camped overnight. Some other guys ended up joining us in the evening. We shared a fire kind of thing, and they're like, "Oh, well, we had planned to just turn around and go straight back down that trail since we knew where we were." And they're like, "Well, if you're gonna do that, if you're gonna do an out and back for one night, you should at least go up the trail and then take this other trail down. It brings you back down to where your cars are parked." We figured since they had done this hike before that they knew better, but that was not necessarily the right thing to think. Turns out the next morning that the trail that we thought we were taking, that we thought that they had pointed at, was not the trail that they had intended to point at. And we accidentally went down the other side of the mountain into the Slick Rock Wilderness, which is the other side of that mountain divide. We didn't realize that we had done that until we were too far gone. And we were facing like a 5-mile climb to get back to where we had started.
Oh my gosh.
So instead, we decided to keep on going and try to find the nearest parking spot, which when we finally got to it, it ended up being in the Nantahala forest. We ended up in 3 different forests by the time we were done with this trip. It all culminated to us being just absolutely exhausted because we had hiked down the hardest trail in the Slick Rock Wilderness, unbeknownst to us. And we were physically exhausted, emotionally exhausted. I had shoved this like 4-person tent back in my bag, and it was wet because it had rained the night before. So I was probably carrying like almost 50 pounds on me with everything. We dropped our packs at the parking spot. We were really hoping there was a car there. There was not, of course. And I physically ran up the next mountain so that I could get a signal enough to call Steven and ask him to send us a rescue.
Oh my gosh.
I actually called him and asked him to send us a cab. Turns out cabs don't go into the mountains.
What?
So he graciously called the Graham County Rescue Squad, and they came and rescued us with a box of apple fritters and a smile on their face, and we all felt like giant boobs because we had taken these guys away from their evening meals just because we didn't want to camp anymore. So dumb. Anyway, that trip just went terribly, right? We get to the campsite was beautiful, but we didn't end up seeing anything else that we wanted to see. We ended up getting what I call misplaced, not lost, misplaced.
Right.
And then we get into Asheville. We ended up crashing with my friend Anthony because there's absolutely no hotels open that had. There must have been some sort of convention in town. I have no fucking idea. Oh, I cursed. Anyways,
my God,
Liz, have you heard this podcast before?
I listen to every episode. Yeah. Anyways,
obviously not because
what made me realize that I had been turned into a crazy person and was hooked was that about 2 days after we had gotten back from that terrible trip, my friend Kim and I looked at each other. We're like, I want to go back to the same place really soon.
Nice.
So we actually went back in August of that year and redid what we had intended to do and had an amazing trip. Saw the most beautiful place I have ever seen in North Carolina. I still haven't seen something better, and I've done a lot of backpacking since. I've been there one other time since then, and plan to go back again this year. Thing is, though, Joyce Kilmer, it keeps on punishing me. Every time I go back, something else bad happens.
Oh, gosh.
So the wilderness hates me, but I love it. Yeah, the other 2 times I've gone, the second time a dog ran away for a half an hour. He came back without his pack, so he had no dog food after that. And then the third time I went, Mazzy ran away for 2 hours. I had to go back to the trailhead and search for her, and somebody had picked her up and gave her an egg salad sandwich and was trying to contact me, but there's no freaking signal out there, and it was a mess. So yeah, Joyce
Sorry, I like the image of a dog eating an egg salad sandwich.
Oh God, it was so funny. These people are like,
I know she was lost and you were probably terrified, but
I was. They're like, yeah, she seemed really hungry, so we gave her an egg salad sandwich. I'm like, I would have eaten an egg salad sandwich too, but she didn't have breakfast this morning.
Right, yeah. It's like, have you met a dog before? They always seem hungry.
Right?
Well, thank you. Gosh, thank you so much, Liz.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Lauren, we kind of heard your story about why you maybe shied away from backpacking now, but if we could hear more about kind of like RAGBRAI and bikepacking, that'd be really cool.
And Lauren, you can't forget about your Mont Blanc trip.
Oh yeah, well. So a couple more. Just I've done some exploratory backpacking out in Europe a little bit. So while we're still on backpacking, I'll go into a couple trips that I did there. I did one. So I was in Germany in 2015. It started off as a work trip, but after that work portion, I wanted to stick around. So I said, I'm going to take advantage of this. My former boss was gracious enough. She lived in Germany at the time. So she was gracious enough to let me keep my work things at her house. I ended up taking myself, and my backpack, and we being me and my backpack, it just became plural. And we explored the countryside, went, and each day I would get up and get on the train. Didn't have final destination yet. So I'd get on the train and figure out where I was going that day. I would book a hostel while I was on the train and say, all right, that'll be my destination. Do a little bit of research beforehand. And it was such an adventure getting out, not living in the confines of a plan, not living in the confines of somebody telling me what I had to do. And the other thing that was nice too, at that point, I was doing it by myself. I didn't have to worry about being the sole decision maker for everybody else and worried about, well, are they going to be on board with this? Are they not going to be on board with this? And there's a time and place for everything. But in this particular instance, it was really neat being able to just be fully responsible and fully just in charge of my own decisions, in that sense of I'm not worried about other people. I'm not worried about, I guess it was kind of a selfish mentality, but however, so it was me and the backpack, and we first started off at a small ski village in the Alps. It was the Austrian-Germany border, and I decided to do a day hike. Essentially, it ended up being a day hike up a mountain. How that happened, I started wandering. I was at the bottom of the mountain, and I figured, well, I could either go up the ski lift, get halfway up, and then climb the rest of the way up, or hike the rest of the way up. But then I heard cowbells, and so I just started wandering. And then I realized, oh, there's a trail here. And so I just kept wandering. And I think that was the day that wanderlust hit, where I learned that it's totally okay to not have a plan. And because this was the very beginning of this trip too, I just started walking, and I kept walking, and I kept walking, and twists and turns. I was on a trail, so I knew that it was going to lead to somewhere. I did have a map, so I did have a little security blanket. But I just kept going up and up and up. And eventually I found the first tier where the first ski lift would let off, found myself some food, and was able to continue up the rest of the way. And then I had to hike all the way back down that same day. And that ended up being all the way from the bottom up to the top, all the way back down. Really neat adventure. Later that day, I got back to the village and I decided I was going to have a dinner just to myself before going back to the hostel. There were some school kids there. So I said, I'm just going to have a nice, quiet dinner in town. What I hadn't accounted for is that it was the off season in a ski village in the German Alps.
So lots of options, right?
Lots of options. So I get done with dinner and I go to get the bus. Come to find out the bus had gone its last route already. So I'm like, okay, no problem. That's fine. I'll find a taxi. Well, come to find out there's no taxis either. So I start wandering and I'm like, well, let me pull out my phone to see how far it is. Can I walk there? It was another 7 kilometers back to the hostel, up a mountain road in the dark, and my battery was critically low. I'm like, well,
Cow.
great. Now what do I do? So I actually ended up going and I found a gas station. I had passed it previously. I decided to walk back that way because at this point I'm thinking, okay, it's me and a park bench. I don't speak this language. I learned a little bit, but not enough. So as I was walking past the gas station, there was a gentleman that was there that was pumping gas. And so I ended up asking said gentleman that was pumping gas in the best German that I could figure out at the time if he could give me a ride back to the hostel. And he was very generous and very gracious, and he did. um, but that also showed the goodness of people. Come to find out, as we were talking, I had my hand next to the door handle, very close to the door handle. Like if I needed to jump, I was ready. But he didn't seem like he would do anything. But that's what they all say. But anyway, we were talking. Again, he didn't really speak much English. I didn't speak much German, but we were able to communicate enough. And he sold the lederhosen and the dirndls in town. And so I would have gone and gotten one, but the train the next day left before that. The rest of that trip, just exploring and adventuring, choosing your own ending. I was scared going into it, but I didn't let that fear hold me back from what I was able to find on the other side of going into it. Especially that first time when I stepped off the platform. Oh my gosh, I was terrified. I'm like, okay, what am I doing? I am literally here. I don't have a destination. I don't have a plan. And then you just went, and it was amazing. I ended up landing in Switzerland, did some hiking in the Swiss Alps. So that was, I think, my first soiree into European style backpacking. Because then that ended up bringing me back. This past year, I did another European adventure out and hiked the Tour du Mont Blanc. Pardon my horrendous French accent. Do not speak French. Speak it about as much as I speak German, which it got me a ride. So this one was a backpacking adventure where we were going hut to hut. And so we didn't have to have tents, which was nice because that would have been a lot of weight. But overall, it's around 100-ish miles, 35,000 feet of climbing throughout the course of the whole trail. It began and ended in the town of Chamonix, France. And it went through down through Italy, up and around through Switzerland, and then back into France. And European hiking and European backpacking is very different than the American version. So when I was planning the trip, I was trying to anticipate how much food do I bring. So how much weight am I going to be carrying in snacks, in food? How many tuna packets do I need to bring for lunches? And they said, oh no, you'll be fine. And my anticipation is, okay, 100-mile, this is a 7-day stretch, 100 miles. I won't be fine. My imagery is the Appalachian Trail, for example, where you're in the wilderness, you're fending for yourself, and you're going to be lucky if you find essentially a bed to sleep in that night. I mean, you can plan it out so there's the little huts that you can stay in. But European hiking and backpacking, there are little huts every, I don't know, 3 or 4 miles, and they end up being cafes. So it's a cafe. It's almost like a hostel. We had a group there were 7 of us, plus our guide that we had. And you get there, and You're able to take a warm shower. I mean, I felt really spoiled as a backpacker. I'm like, this is backpacking. I
Wow.
guess so. I mean, I'm hiking, but and the thing that was even better, so back to the food part, they're like, oh no, you'll be fine. Don't worry about what you bring. Like, you'll have more food than you ever know what to do with. And I just didn't know what that meant or what that looked like. So I still had my bag of like security snacks. But that first night that we got to our first hut, so at first they brought out some soup. And I thought, okay, well, I guess I'll be hungry. Well, then they brought out cheese. Okay, cool. There's cheese. And then they brought out bread. Oh, okay. There's a bread course. All right. And then they brought out sausage, like a big sausage course. Okay, there's more food. And then they brought out, they called them in French Prince's potatoes, which they're basically the scallop potatoes. Potatoes are cheesy potatoes, rich cheesy potatoes. And then after that, I mean, this is already a 4-course meal. And then after that, they bring out this apple tart that they had just baked up. It was unbelievable.
Jeez.
Like, and so, but I mean, you worked hard that day. And so they fed you well that evening. And with all the different huts, each night, it was almost like they were trying to outdo the other huts. And so the meals were absolutely spectacular. They were unbelievable. I would have never expected that to be the case. And then during the day, you would pass more of these huts and you could grab a beer, you could grab lunch, you could grab a cappuccino, you could grab whatever you wanted. They had water spigots along the way. It was fresh mountain filtered water and just flowing, free flowing. So just go stick your water bottle underneath it. I mean, it was luxurious by way of backpacking. I got real spoiled. And it's quite different.
Wow.
And you're in the Alps, so there's no mosquitoes. So needless
Well,
to
Lauren, thanks. Now we all feel super jealous. All Liz's dog got was an egg salad sandwich.
Yeah.
We all make our choices, Daniel. We all make our choices.
Apparently.
So anyway,
Wow, that's awesome.
That's what got me hooked onto, say, maybe some of the European style hikes.
I'll go backpacking as long as I get a 5-course gourmet meal along with it.
Right? I mean, there was panna cotta, there was braised short ribs, there was, you name it. It was delicious.
I mean, I like my freezer fried food.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
I would hate to hear it, Lauren, after you did that trip that you were like, I don't know if backpacking's for
me. Maybe no.
Going off something both Lauren and Liz talked about, both of you talked about kind of the empowerment you get when you go backpacking out in the backcountry and kind of fend for yourself. And I know, Lauren, you kind of talked about backpacking alone. Liz, have you done much backpacking alone? Can you talk more about the empowerment both of you feel being out in the wilderness, fending for yourself, kind of just losing yourself in the trees and the noise and the forest and the nature around you? I know we kind of touched on it briefly, both when you talked about it, but I would really like to get more about that.
I have never gone on my own. I've always had a couple people with me at least. As remote as you get out in the backcountry, I always like to have a person there. I'm not everybody's like that, but that's just how my preference is. And maybe someday I'll get enough hair in my chest to give it a go for just a solo. But the way or the reason, I guess, what makes me feel empowered is it's the challenge of it. It's not everybody can plan a trip, pack everything in their bag right, throw it on their back and be like, I'm going to carry this for the next, 6 hours, something like that. Just knowing that there's like this exclusive group of people that are willing to give this challenge a try just makes it feel like, badass points or that sort of thing.
Hell yeah.
Plus there's, when you tell people stories of your backpacking trip, you can get so much farther back when you don't have to turn around and head back to your car. So you're seeing things that the, broader population are never going to see. And that's just mind blowing, for one thing, that they're going to miss it. And two, that made the decision to do that and challenge yourself.
When the last time I went backpacking, my older brother and I went to Klingman's Dome in Western North Carolina. And that was kind of something like we got off the trail. We had done a weekend out there and we asked this guy, because like I can't even talk tonight. Klingman's Dome, there's like, you can park your car and there's a lookout that people can go on to. And it's just like people can just make a day of it by getting in their car and going to it. And like there was this guy, like we got off the trail, like looking haggard, like just bear poop and deer poop all over us. And
what kind of backpacking were you doing,
right?
Daniel?
Did you roll in it?
We had to fight the predator, so we had to camouflage ourselves with mud and poop and stuff.
If you smell like it, they're not going to be offended that you're a human.
Thank you, Lauren.
You are welcome.
You have done European backpacking, which is what we had done.
That's right.
No, but we asked this random guy to take a picture for us, and we're like, yeah, we just got off the trail, like, and backpacking for 2 days, and he was like, my gosh, like I could never do that. Like we're just here for like an hour. I was like, there's some certain locations where certainly some people can do it and others can't, but there's almost like you just have to kind of beat that hurdle to empower yourself to kind of do it. And I know some people can't physically do it, but the people who have it in their mind that they can't do it, I don't know. I'm sure they could.
No,
but
I would agree.
I'm just rambling.
Sorry, go ahead, Lauren.
No, I think it's right. It's the mental game, and it is terrifying being out there in the darkness, in the night. But you have to be stronger than it. And for me, I don't want it to hold me back. I don't want that fear to prevent me from doing the things that I want to do. And so I'll still go out and I'll still do it. I'll still go out. I'll still sleep in the woods because there was a bear out there at one point. Doesn't mean it's going to happen again.
Right.
And if you let that fear hold you back, then you're never going to be able to experience the other side of it. You're never going to be able to experience that empowerment, that feeling of, hey, you know what? I just did that. Most people can't. That feeling that you were talking about, Liz, and like those guys that you were talking about too, Daniel. Like, if you just stay in your couch, you're not going to experience that joy and satisfaction of the badassery.
Yeah, I think there's something visceral, I think, about backpacking, even apart from bikepacking or mountain biking, that I enjoy. And part of that's just this kind of, and this is going to sound super woo-woo. It's like the reconnection with nature aspect. Like the last time I went, like I purposely didn't bring my phone. So like my dad did, but it was primarily so we had a camera. But I remember like it was one of the first times that I was able to like look up at the stars and like really think about it for a long time. And it was also another way for me, like I really enjoy doing outdoor activities with my father because he's an awesome dude. He's a weird dude, but he's an awesome dude. But it's like it really is one of these times where like he and I can connect and not be distracted by like work emails coming through or phone calls or text messages. And I remember like the first time I experienced that, I was much younger, but we were out in Utah backpacking, and we'd been out for a week, and every evening it was gorgeous, like clear skies. And it was the first time I had seen the Milky Way in its entirety, like zero light pollution. And the night sky was just completely illuminated. And I was like, holy shit, this is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And you would like, we as a family would just sit outside after we'd like gotten done, cleaning up camp and everything and getting ready to turn in, and just like stare up at the stars. And like I said, as woo as that sounds, there's just something very, very just visceral and immediate about that type of kind of experience where you're just not influenced by anything else other than nature that's around you. And, in that case, my family, which was really, really nice. So.
No, that's 100% to that. It's funny. People were commenting to me, Lauren, are you always this happy? Because I end up getting in those situations and I realize that I am the best version of myself when I am out there. And so, no, I'm not always that happy. But do you see where we are right now? Have you opened your eyes and looked at the scenery? And I mean, that was the Alps, but I'll get that way in, in our little areas. I mean, even in Umstead, even in some of these little local parks. Have you seen where we are? We are so fortunate to be able to be in these spaces.
I think I'm the smelliest I am on these trips.
Okay, there's that.
That's the goal.
So, but Liz, I think you would agree that after 2 or 3 days, you just kind of become immune from the smell. So, it is what it is. You just have to stay out. You have to stay out long enough so that like the dirt clogs the olfactory pores.
That's right. I have so I'm Italian, if you couldn't tell, and and I have a very I like to say that olive oil flows through our veins. Well, when you're Italian, and that might actually be true, because there was this one trip that I was on with Kim and Blake, and I warned them all. I told them, I was like, we 1-day trips, no big deal. I look gross the next day, but it's pretty manageable. But on day 2, it's going to be a lot worse. And she didn't believe me until I woke up the next day and I looked like I was straight out of Grease Lightning, and there was no taming the shine on my face. She's like, "Whoa, okay, I believe you now." So yeah, I don't think it gets better with time for me. I think when I do this week trip with Kim coming up this year, I think I'm just gonna have to not take pictures of myself for a couple of days.
Right.
But you know what? That's the wonderful thing about it. There are no mirrors. There are no mirrors. And
except when Kim's another photographer.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Well,
Oh, no.
good luck. We also want to talk about bike packing as well, because I think that's all 4 of us on this call met through a cycling team or a cycling group or whatever you want to call us. Our roving 2-wheeled band of misfits,
a cycling retinue, if you will.
Oh, sorry. Yes,
wow.
Review.
I'm
just trying to be French like Lauren.
Oh, you did a great job. You did a great job.
Thanks.
Oui. And so, for both Liz and Lauren, both of whom you all have invested in some very nice gravel bikes and bikepacking bikes. What has been that evolution of dabbling in, or at least of interest in bikepacking, and how does that relate to your history backpacking and kind of the adventuring you do on 2 feet instead of 2 wheels?
Just real quick for me, I was thinking about this a minute ago. It kind of solves the problem of, I want to see these sites, but this gravel road is really boring to walk on for this long. So a bike makes it so much faster, and you can cover so much more ground and see some pretty magnificent things at the same time. I haven't considered the out west bikepacking quite yet. I don't think I'm quite to that caliber yet. The sights that you can see out there would be even more magnificent. But Lauren's actually the one that's done a little bit of
so it's more adventure riding, and just going out for the sheer fun of, all you have to do is get from point A to point B, which I guess maybe was the appeal also of Mount Blanc, which is also maybe the appeal of backpacking. You just get from point A to point B. And we get so caught up in our world of everything and busy, that taking a step back and having that's your one task, you can just enjoy the heck out of it. And so I did RAGBRAI, which stands for the Register's Annual Great Bike Ride Across Iowa. I've done that 2 years in a row not in a row, but I did that 2 years, a number of years ago. And it was such an adventure. I mean, it's basically a rolling party on wheels. You get up and your whole goal is to get to the next town. It's, in a way, it's cheating bikepacking, because you have the option to carry your own gear, but there's so many different charter services and services that can carry your gear that you just don't carry your gear. So I went and I did a service, one of the charter services, but you just go and you see the different towns. In the Midwest, there's a lot of soy fields. There's some wind fields. There's, believe it or not, there's hills. I learned that Iowa is actually pretty hilly in certain spots. Wouldn't have ever guessed that. But the first year that I did it, it was more or less a magical experience. Had the time of my life. I don't think I slept at all. I might have been, was I drunk the whole time? Not the whole time, but
Hell yeah.
just had a blast. I lived up Ragbri. And I got back and I said, I got to go do this again. And so I did it again the next year. And it's almost like summer camp as an adult. So again, not true bike packing. Oh, that's right. And I forgot, before I even did any of that, the first big trip that I did was actually across North Carolina. And for me, cycling, I just want something that's going to fill my time, bring me community, and bring me joy. And if it's not
That's
making,
a lot to ask for, Lauren. Let me tell you.
well, no, it's
Just
pretty,
kidding.
it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. Just don't be an asshole. You're good. Not you guys, but like just overall.
Like Adam said, a lot to ask.
Yeah.
for.
Have you met cyclists, Lauren?
I
Goodness gracious.
have, okay, it's a lot to ask. You're right.
And you're a roadie.
I know. Well,
Yeah.
Oh.
bike packing and adventure riding. Not all the roadie people. I went on the trip in North Carolina. I did cycle North Carolina. That was another trip where I showed up by myself. Ended up developing a community of people. Like, there was a group that ended up more or less adopting me from the first hour that I walked on the bus. They're like, oh, you can come, you can be friends with us. Granted, the general demographic of the Cycle North Carolina crew is more or less retired. So I stood out like a sore thumb. It was like, what are you doing
Right.
here? I don't know. I'm riding my bike across the state. Why not?
Right.
Why not's right.
Right. But it was something to do. And again, there was a service that hauled my stuff. So I haven't done much by way of, again, true bike packing. I just got my adventure gravel bike to be able to outfit. And honestly, I cannot wait to get out and outfit it and explore and see where the road takes me. I'm really looking forward to that.
Cool.
Same.
Yes.
Man.
Can't wait.
Adam, was there anything else that you wanted to discuss? Liz, Lauren, is there anything else you wanted to discuss?
The only thing I wanted to add real quick to the bike packing is I think the novelty of the distance is another part of what makes it so intriguing. It's the idea that you can ride so far in one trip, and that just makes it like another one of those challenges that you want to do.
That's a great point.
I think that's the neat thing about bike packing is the potential to start combining those two. And that is definitely one of the draws to bike packing for me, at least at some point in time, is being able to cover a lot more distance, but also being able to still get those like really like adventure-esque type experiences as well.
Mhm.
Instead of doing loops on bandit trails here in North Carolina.
Right.
Not that I would,
Wait.
not that any of us would ever do that.
No.
Adam, what?
What?
Bandit trails? Well, we're taking you in. I'm breaking a curfew and stay at home to just arrest you for riding on bandit trails.
Wow.
You butthead.
Butthead.
Yeah, take that. Really, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for sharing all the stories.
Well, thanks for
You're
having us.
This has been fun.
This has been fun.
Thank God. Otherwise, thank
good.
you guys so much for talking with Adam and I.
I'm a little concerned for your listeners for this episode because there are 0 dick jokes.
Well,
crap.
There's still time.
this is the section. All right, Adam, what's your best? What was the dick joke you heard this week?
Oh gosh.
Dick joke of the week.
This is a new section. I don't think I agreed to this. It's okay.
That's what she said. Oh yeah.
What have I done?
Thank you, Lauren, bringing it all back around.
It's now
Go-
passion
go-
fruits.
Both
Yeah.
your faults.
Yeah, this almost like became a serious podcast. What the hell, guys?
Sorry. Don't worry. We brought it back.
Yeah. Again, seriously, thank you guys so much for talking with us. Adam, shall we hop into recommendations?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, Lauren and Liz, as I'm sure you both know, each episode we do recommendations. This can relate to the subject that we've talked about. Really, it's kind of Adam and I suggesting and recommending things to each other that we've kind of really been excited about that doesn't really warrant a full episode, but something that we want to talk about and recommend to each other.
Mm.
Last time, Adam, you recommended to me the movie 1917.
Yes.
And I watched it.
Yeah.
And it was good. I really enjoyed the movie. I'm a fan of war movies, and frankly, there aren't a lot of World War I movies that I've seen, but I really enjoyed the movie and how they crafted and how they hid the fact that it was supposed to be one continuous shot, but that it was actually multiple shots
Right.
that made it seem like one continuous shot. But yeah, the cinematography, because we're all cinephiles on this podcast, we can talk about the cinematography and the acting. It was I had wanted to see it, and I'm really glad I got to see it on my TV because it was really, really good. And yeah, I appreciate the recommendation.
Good. I'm glad. What did you recommend to me last time?
Oh, that means you totally did it, right?
I think I actually did.
Okay, Adam.
I listened to the album "Sickness Divine" by Red Death.
Okay, so that was 2 episodes ago. What'd you think of that?
I thought it was good. Not totally my cup of tea. A little bit too punk oriented for exactly my taste. But it was good. It was solid.
God, I listened to that today, and I was like rocking out in my car and just freaked some old people out. It was amazing. Last time I recommended to you the album by Melvins, A Senile Animal. Did you listen to that?
I did not listen to that. I'm sorry. You recommended that, and then Lamb of God came out with 2 brand new singles, and I was like, nope.
Okay, Adam. So when they're singles from a band, do you just go back and forth, back and forth?
Yes.
Doesn't that ruin the album for you?
Nope.
You're such a singles guy. You're ruining the music industry.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Me, Steve Jobs, and I, conspired to ruin the music industry. One 99-cent song at a time. Let me tell you.
Well, please listen to A Senile Animal by Melvins.
I will.
I think you would enjoy it. You
Um,
friend.
So,
So yes, Liz and Lauren, any recommendations for us?
I have this one YouTube video I've been doing a lot recently.
yes.
It's by this lady. It's a fitness thing, so it's not that cool. It's by this lady that her channel is called Mad Fit, I believe, and it's a 30-minute stretch episode, and she runs you through 30 minutes of pretty dancer specific stretching, and it focuses really heavy on the hamstrings and the legs and the hip flexors, and I've done it many times in a row now, and it just makes me feel fantastic. So that's my recommendation. Everybody needs to stretch, so it's a good one.
Interesting. As everybody knows, I'm terrible about watching stuff on YouTube, but I was talking with some older folk who mentioned that they have been wanting to get into what they called elderly yoga. And I was like, I need to, because I'm totally not flexible at all. So I need to get into yoga. Well, thank you. Mad Fit on YouTube. Thank you, Liz.
Mm-hmm.
Lauren, what about you?
Okay, so my recommendation is actually going to come inadvertently through Liz. She doesn't know this yet. But Liz ended up gifting me a paint by number at the beginning of COVID.
Cool.
Yeah, and it was spectacular. I got addicted to it to the degree of addiction of it might not have been healthy how fast I did it, because it was so addicting. And so I'm going to recommend, if you ever just need a stress relief, you don't need to do it. You don't need to do the whole thing in like 2 weeks. But a paint by number is surprisingly a great way to be able to unwind at the end of a day. I'm sure all of your listeners would be really excited to know that tidbit.
Yeah, I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
So
And we all need that now.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Mhm.
Lauren and Liz, do you have a specific like paint by numbers kit or brand that you recommend?
Adam's
No,
all about
they're
the brand.
there's a ton of them on Amazon.
Yeah.
They range in price from like $10 to like $40, and
Oh my god.
they are very difficult.
They
But they're
are.
totally worth it.
Cool. Adam.
Sure. So I have 2 books that I'd like to recommend for anyone
God.
and everything. And no, hold. Goodness gracious, Daniel.
When did you learn how to read, Adam?
Yesterday. Gosh.
All right, so we have Go Spot or Go Dog Go and
C Spot Run. and I graduated to the Berenstain Bears chapter books earlier this week. So, you know.
all right, Adam,
Anyways.
what are your 2 books?
So I would imagine some of you all have read at least one of these. So the first is A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson.
Oh yeah.
So fantastic book, really funny, and just like once again, like wonderfully introspective as well. And the movie isn't half bad either, but definitely read the book first. And then one of my favorite books of all is Into Thin Air by John Krakauer, and it's about this. It's about an Everest summit attempt. And they actually made it into a movie as well. That was pretty terrible, but it's just really interesting. I enjoy John Krakauer as an adventure writer, and yeah, it's an account of him attempting to climb Everest. So very, very good.
So 2 movie recommendations from Adam. Got him.
And last but not least, Daniel. What do you
Yes. All right. So, Adam, I want to recommend you more music. One is for a band that I don't think you like
have? Why would you recommend it to me then?
because it's a fucking awesome album.
Okay,
Ugh.
hit me.
Okay. So here are my recommendations, Adam. First is, I know I recommended to you in like our first or second episode, the band Elder, their album Dead Root Stirring, which was their second album, which is kind of very stoner rock-ish. Well, they just came out with a new album last Friday called Omens. That's more psychedelic rock than stoner rock, and it is amazing, is awesome, is like a true evolution of their sound. And I think you should listen to it because I don't think you'll like it, and I want to punish you. All right, I have 3 recommendations. I'm so sorry, Adam.
Gracious.
So yeah.
Okay.
Oh, give me a break, Mister. A Walk in the Woods, the book and the movie, and then Into Thin Air, the book and the movie. So that, and then Fiona Apple also came out with an amazing album. Please listen to that because I would like to get your take on it because I think it's something completely opposite of what you might listen to. And then, okay, so kind of tailing this off into the end of the episode, I guested on a podcast called Have Not Seen This with Rafe Telsch. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name. Everybody should listen to the episode that I was on talking about Edge of Tomorrow. But his podcast is really awesome. It's a movie podcast where people talk about, guests come on and talk about one of their favorite movies where it's like their favorite movie, but they're surprised that people have not seen the movie. So a couple of my favorite episodes of the podcast are his episode about The Matrix and John Wick, which has a lot of very good discussion. So I think, Adam, you should check out the podcast Have Not Seen This, and everybody should check out the podcast Have Not Seen This because the host was very gracious to have my stupid ass on there and let me talk about a stupid ass movie for a good hour. So
yeah,
yes.
I'll check that out. I just followed it on Spotify. That's there's some interesting stuff on here. Anyways, cool.
Hell yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, Liz and Lauren, thank you so much. Is there anything you guys want to plug? You know, your Twitter handles or Instagram?
No plugging here. Oh, that's what she said.
COVID.
Lord.
Well, thank you guys so much. Adam, for our plugs, you can find us on Twitter at
Passion Fruits P2.
Oh my God, he got it.
Yes.
Instagram at
Passion Fruits Podcast.
Gmail at
passionfruitspodcast@gmail.com.
And we have a stupid blog, which is a lot of stupid fun because we're 2000 late. That can be found at passionfruitspodcast.home.blog. We are on every podcast app. We are on iTunes. We are on Spotify. Rate and review, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family. So yes, thank you, everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
guys.
Thank you.
No, thank you.